Dr. Corsi, I'm hopeful that we are firing on all cylinders today, and thank you for joining me for a special Wednesday edition of Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America. How are you today, Doctor?
I'm good. It does look like we're going to be on all cylinders today because I think it started playing over on YouTube.
Excellent. So, as people know, normally, Doctor, on Thursdays at 5 p.m., we're doing the sponsor exclusive show, Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America. People can get to that on Patreon and Subscribestar, either by sponsoring your channel, Doctor, or Crowdsource the Truth, or ideally both. And of course, when we do these YouTube previews, we have about a 20 to 25 minute conversation before each of the shows. And viewers of Corsi Nation can enjoy watching the broadcasts on your YouTube channel as well, Dr. Corsi. So I'm pleased that all of the technological upgrades that I've been making are kind of congealing at long last, and we're getting through some of the difficulty we had last week. What's been happening in the world that you'd like to discuss with our viewers today, Doctor?
Well, there's quite a bit going on. I mean, I want to start with the Donald Trump's trip to India, which I thought was a resounding success. I mean, it was hugely successful.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the biggest crowds of his presidency, or maybe of anyone's presidency, when you see that stadium, which was packed with, 150,000 people in India,
Yeah.
and the reception that he got. What impressed me so much about the trip is that it's Donald Trump's attempt to do these bilateral trade deals instead of the multilateral, New World Order, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Partnership, and the One World Order, kumbaya, with new regional transportation courts and governments. Donald Trump's going back to the old-fashioned way of just doing bilateral deals, and I think it's a lot better for U.S. security and for the U.S. economy. And I'm also very pleased to see that we have a deepening relationship with India because it balances us with China in Asia. And clearly, India is surpassing China in both population and very possibly economy,
Hmm.
with China suffering as it is with this the coronavirus. And we can talk about that too as well, because President Trump is going to make have a press conference today about the coronavirus, and I've been following it very closely. But just to finish on what I'm seeing with Donald Trump on the India trip is that while he's out, Donald Trump is president doing these presidential visits, getting huge reception in international news. If you watch the Democratic debate last night in South Carolina, it was
Yeah.
clearly a debacle. I mean,
Yeah.
the moderators lost control. Everybody had their hand raised. It was demanding time. Nobody of the seven candidates respected the time. They all talked over each other. So at one point, they were all talking at once. I mean,
Yeah.
I just couldn't follow it at all. It was like like they say, a clown show, and you begin to say, are these the people who want to run the country? They
Yeah.
they can't even run a debate in any fashion that's reasonable. And I also had the other thought that with this kind of bitterness among the debates, the debating with the Democratic candidates, I don't know that they're going to come together even in the July nominating convention in Milwaukee, the Democratic National Nominating Convention. We could have another convention disaster with the Biden people fighting the Sanders people. And if there is an attempt to take away the nomination again from Bernie Sanders, I think there would be a revolt within the Democratic Party.
Hmm.
But my
Maybe.
guess is Democratic Party is a Democratic Socialist Party. It's controlled by the AOC wing. Bernie Sanders has become the normal. And I've written this little red book of Democrat Socialist Lies, which we hope to have out before the election. I'm redoing my website, CorsiNation.com. We may feature it on there. But at any rate, I think the Democrats have moved so far left. I think it's like 1972 when the Democrats nominated George McGovern, in all the rancor the anti-war movement, the 1968 convention, which was riots in the street, and the Democrats took one state. But at the
Dr.
same
Corsi,
time,
sorry,
I
remind
caution
me,
that we can't get complacent. Yes, go ahead.
what's the website where that little red book of Democrat lies will be available?
I haven't posted it yet, but CorsiNation.com is being redone. We took it down. It's been down for about a month, and so we're completely redoing the site, making sure that we do all the SEO, which is search engine optimization, that we really have a site that is going to be fast. We put it on a dedicated server. We're going to have a lot of new features to it. I've expanded the podcasts I'm doing so that it's on SoundCloud and Spotify and other platforms.
Nice.
And I'm doing these deep dives on Patreon and Subscribestar. I'm going to begin investigating and looking at the Watergate, some books on Watergate.
Oh, wow.
And doing some interviews with some of the experts who are still alive in the JFK assassination. So
fantastic.
I've got a lot of plans for developing out these sites in 2020, and I'm aggressively pursuing it right now with a new team in place.
Excellent.
And I think it'll be so. I've written this little red book, which is after the Mao's Cultural Revolution,
right,
which was so disastrous. They had a little red book of Mao's sayings, and this is the little red book of Democrat Socialist lies. And I intend to have a published version of it, but since the published version can't be out until about October, I'm thinking of doing a pre-October rollout of this book on my website, and I'm figuring out now how best to do that.
We should also remind people, Dr. Corsi, that your book, Coup d'etat, is just days away from release, so they can go to Amazon.com, pre-order the book, and it's going to arrive within a week. So that'll be exciting for people to read all about.
I got my first copies right here. If you put it up on the screen, I'll show you what it looks like. You can see me holding it right now.
Excellent.
And it's a substantial book. I was very pleased with it. It comes out to be almost 300 pages, and I really explain how this was a coup d'etat, going through chapter and verse, how it was engineered as an international intelligence agency conspiracy, together with a leading in the United States, John Brennan in the CIA, Comey in the CIA, and the FBI. It's a very extensive analysis, and I think it's going to do quite well.
And is there an opportunity, Doctor, for people to get a signed copy of the book?
Yes, because on my website, when it rolls out, we're going to say for a $100 donation, I'm going to do a signed version. You'll get 2 books, this and Silent No More. And then additionally, you can buy the books individually on my site, and I'll sign them. So we'll have a ability to buy them. If you don't want to buy it from Amazon, we're going to be able to buy it from CorsiNation.com and get a signed version. And it'll be at a slight premium because we have to do the mailing and everything, and we're not as efficient. We don't have the volume that you do with Amazon, so we don't.
You don't have thousands of trucks there at your house, Dr. Corsi? I'm surprised.
I only wish we did.
I don't know.
That'll be the day. That'll be the day.
Yeah. Now, so Dr. Corsi, I want to also remind people that if they're watching us on YouTube right now, people can watch on the Jerome Corsi YouTube channel, and there is an opportunity to utilize Super Chat there to support Dr. Corsi. Some people have been asking me how to use Super Chat. You can find it right here at the bottom of the chat, and if you just click on that, I don't know why it's not letting me zoom in. There we go. You just click on that $sign. It allows you to support Dr. Corsi. And of course, if you're watching on the Crowdsource the Truth 2 YouTube channel, you can use Super Chat there as well. So just to take you back to the Democrat debate, Dr. Corsi, calling it a debacle is something of an insult to debacles. It was absolutely ridiculous. Mike Bloomberg was trying to make jokes that weren't funny or appropriate.
Oh, it was terrible. And I don't think they found a Bernie Slayer. There's no Bernie Slayer in the offing here. I don't see it happening. I expect that Biden will win by a narrow margin. the South Carolina primary because, again, he is likely to hold the South Carolina black vote, which is a large percentage of those who will vote in the Democratic primary. I don't expect that Bernie will be knocked out of the Super Tuesday, which occurs on March 5th. And I think you've got a lot of, that's the same day my book will be published. You've got a lot of people who are lining up. Bloomberg is not, I think, going to surface
Sorry,
by the
doctor, it's
5th.
the March 3rd, Super Tuesday.
March 3rd. March 3rd. Well, okay.
Because the
That's
reason I
Tuesday.
remember
My
that is
book will
that
be out on Thursday. That's right.
right,
It's
and
March
Hillary
3rd.
Clinton
Yes.
has her her ridiculous documentary miniseries or whatever it is coming out on Hulu on the 6th. So it's right after Super Tuesday. Charles had mentioned something to me about that. I'm not sure what the significance of that timing is, but I was surprised to learn yesterday, and this is something that I should have known. Hulu, which is, maybe people know, it's an alternative to Netflix and now Disney Plus and all these online streaming services instead of cable TV. Hulu is
Right.
actually owned by Disney. So there's this
Yes.
remarkable monopoly in the streaming video world where if you're Disney, you control a gigantic segment of that market.
Well, Disney, I think, wants to take over from Netflix, and they're going to fight it out. But it's increasingly you don't need a television, and cable, I think, is going to be under a lot of challenges in the next few years from live streaming.
Yeah.
At any rate, I was going to comment on the coronavirus. It's President Trump is going to speak on it today, and I believe that we are going to be able to do a pretty good job of containing it in the United States. I've been reading the medical science on it, and what's clear is to me that it's a combination of SARS and some HIV attacks. These are two diseases that are well understood by medical science, and already there are treatments coming forward and at least one experimental vaccine announced and going into testing. So I think like the SARS and the MERS, which are both respiratory diseases, this is going to hit hard in China. And China does not appear to be taking care of the population with any great care. I mean, I think it's going to be ravaging a lot of China. But the virus is recoverable with the treatments that have been applied, and both a combination of HIV drugs and SARS or MERS drugs seem to be working. And I think we'll have a new vaccine. Now, it's not going to be instant. But in the United States, just like when Ebola, which I followed these viruses very closely, especially when I was reporting for WorldNet Daily. I can remember the panic when Ebola cases were brought to the United States for treatment. But Ebola was handled and contained here, and I think President Trump is going to be able to tell people not to panic, that we will have cases in the United States, but with the medical treatment that we've got, I think we can do a better job containing. The CDC has gone a long way, especially since Ebola, and knowing how to isolate these cases. But one of the other things I'm talking about, and I've been talking about this in my daily decodes, this Corsi Nation decodes, which are on YouTube and others, is that this is a strong argument against the supply chain outsourcing that was done to China by the globalists. I mean, again, the globalists, I think, have completely failed in all their promises of wealth and prosperity, as I've argued going back to 2007 when President George W. Bush was on the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America. Globalism just outsources the manufacturing of components or sometimes the assembly of products to low-cost labor in the third world. And China has gotten a lot of that. China is really a third world economy with a massive, it's a third world country with trying to be a first world economy, but it's so much based on slave labor. And when you get one of these disruptions, companies in the United States expecting, the components to be here, and they're all going to be put in containers with these modal containers, across the ocean in huge container ships, and then brought up in transportation lines on rail and transferred to trucks. That whole North American, highway that was going to be constructed through Texas. All of these things I think are disasters. And Donald Trump is not only going to bilateral trade agreements, he is making a strong argument that companies ought to return to the United States, including pharmaceutical companies, not seeking to do low cost manufacturing in cheap countries with cheap labor.
I'm glad you
Um,
mentioned pharmaceutical companies, Dr. Corsi, because I'm very skeptical of this coronavirus. Trump, it was just saying earlier, we were looking at an article there from The Hill that President Trump is, ripping the news coverage of the coronavirus. I just wonder to what extent, a lot of people have been examining the patents related to the virus and the genetic composition of the virus. Some feel that it's a genetically engineered entity and that it might have been a deliberate thing. I know we don't have the information to really go into that, but it's very curious to see that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is financing a lot of different efforts to try to come up with this vaccine. We know that they're into vaccines. They're also financing the Pirbright Institute, which holds a patent on a genetically modified version of the coronavirus. So I don't know. I don't really trust Bill Gates. There was an article in True Pundit just this morning about the FBI declining to question Bill Gates with regard to the Clinton Foundation.
Well, I've been reading the medical science, and as I said, I did a lot of covering of Ebola and the SARS and MERS. I really got into understanding, enough about the science of viruses. Here is an article. I'm going to post it up for you in the instant messages, so you can possibly put it on the screen. This is a scientific article that just came out, and if you can get it up and I just sent it to you. It has a chart in it, which the debate is really about. A virus is like a ball. It has these spikes coming out of it. Well, the spikes are what attach to healthy cells, and they are protein structures which have a sequence in them, a protein sequence that has to be analyzed to develop treatments and vaccines. Now, there are 4 segments in this novel virus that look like insertions of HIV-related sequences that are imposed into the spike protein of a SARS structure coronavirus. And there's the first articles that came out indicated that it was manufactured in a laboratory, and I'm still leaning towards that. And this says that at least 3 of these sequences are found in the bat coronavirus, the RATG13. There's a lot of coronaviruses. Coronaviruses are basically common colds, and they mutate from animals, even going back to the common cold, which is millennial ago, thousands of years ago when we first began to catch colds. But they're pretty well understood today, and the coronavirus can be treated by a combination of HIV medications and SARS medications. And since it's been completely mapped in the microbiology of the coronavirus, which was identified in January, now by the end of February has been completely mapped, I think that it will be increasing numbers of people recovering, and it may take a year to get a vaccine in place. But this one, to me, is not the pandemic. The structure of it, looking at the science, this is not the pandemic that people were scared about to begin with. And even in China, now I don't know if the data coming out of China is reliable, but it looks like more people are getting cured than it seemed initially. At any rate, I think that's one of the topics I'm following very closely. I want to jump around to a couple of other topics if we can.
Well, we're almost out of time here on YouTube, Doctor, but we're going to have plenty of time to discuss all this in depth when we make the transition over to patreon.com/Jerome Corsi, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com on both of those channels. We're going to be there in just about 10 minutes, so we'll give everybody some time to log on. If they aren't already sponsors, it'll give them an opportunity to sign up to become a sponsor and enjoy the rest of the show. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank our generous Patreon and Subscribestar sponsors for making the show possible. We'll see everybody in 10 minutes, and we'll continue the conversation there, Doctor.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for watching.